Kameron Lennox, you designed the costumes for Pam and Tommy, about Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, of course, and the sex tape that was stolen from them and released. Now, of course, Pam and Tommy were prominent public figures. So how much of their media and public appearances did you have to go through for research? Like, what was that process?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, because the thing for me going into this project was that we were recreating real people that are real in this world and that are still around today. And but during that time, they were very much in front of the camera. They're very their public life, or their private life, was pretty public, but it was only when they were in the public. So there was a lot of research that we had to do to try to recreate their private life. So that did entail watching a lot of interviews with them, reading their books. I watched Baywatch, I watched Barbed Wire, I watched a lot of the MTV interviews with Tommy Lee. And then I also just scoured the internet for photos of them. Our timeline on our show is within the years of late 94 to maybe late 97, I have to say. So that was a very small amount of time in their relationship that we tried to hit. And so for my research, I tried to recreate the timeline of their lives before they met, when they were together, and then after our show takes place, just so that while I was recreating their wardrobe and their life, I was taking tidbits from where they were prior to meeting and then where they were heading and ending up, because their relationship did kind of shift and change as they went. And there is some costume choices they made later that I think people were hoping to see, but they weren't part of this very small slice of life that we were trying to recreate. And I'm talking about like the big fuzzy hats and stuff like that. We weren't quite there yet. So I wanted to kind of show this trajectory of where they were heading.
And are you using with the period series like this? Are you making a lot of stuff custom? Are you looking through vintage? What was the process of finding pieces?
Yeah, I tend to be a bit of a purist when I'm doing period work, and I think that is for me it's a challenge, but it's also the most fun. Trying to find these things and sourcing them. There were a lot of things that we recreated and built. I have an incredible crew on my team that were able to recreate the Baywatch bathing suit, which for me was that one is probably the one I lost the most sleep over, because it is the most iconic piece that she wears. And we were dealing with, some prosthetics that we had to build on. And we were also dealing with a lot of movement, running on the beach and all of that. So that we did recreate and spent a lot of time focusing on and tweaking and making sure it was perfect. We recreated all of the G-strings for Tommy Lee. The suit that he wears to the Barbed Wire premiere, which is this red kind of zoot suit, that one was just imagined. It was just taken from some reference photos throughout the years, and we just imagined that and built it for him. But as far as everything else, I did contact a lot of local vintage dealers to find certain pieces. She does wear some iconic 90s Versace, Dolce & Gabbana. There's a couple vintage Vivienne Westwood dresses in there. And then for Tommy Lee, we recreated all of his hardware jewelry to match the ones that were custom made for him at the time, because that wasn't something that you could just source. We recreated the belt that he wore, because I believe that was custom made for him as well. So yeah, there was a lot of things that we definitely had made for them.
And apart from them, the story also involves a lot of characters who are not, as recognizable figures as Pamela and Tommy Lee, like Rand, who's the one who steals the tape. what was the process of designing for those characters? Who, like, was there more freedom since obviously there weren't as many kind of references directly to them?
Yeah, there's definitely more freedom with Rand and with Uncle Milty. They were both um, from the same kind of stock of people, so we did a lot of research on watching as much as we could of the, the inland valley porn society, and the ones that they were part of. There are uh, the research that we could find was actually in the videotape, so we would just kind of skim through them to see what they look like, but we didn't really know what they were like in real life. There wasn't any, once again, any personal photos of them. And Uncle Milty, the real Uncle Milty, has passed away, so there wasn't any chance of actually contacting him. The funny thing with Nick Offerman, which I find that this is a true test to him as an actor, was we did have a fitting with him where I kind of went a little crazy with his character, because we didn't really know who he was and we were trying to figure out who this character was. And we put him in a lot of pastel colors, a lot of 70s, really tight matching outfits, a lot of neckerchiefs, maybe a little captain's hat. We went a little crazy with him, and he just played it. He played it the whole fitting. And then after a few meetings with producers and showrunners, we decided that we were going to tailor it down, take it down. Like, we had enough peacocks in our show that we didn't need to have another one. And so then we recreated him to be a little more subtle, kind of the workhorse type that just woke up to get dressed to go to work. I did pull a lot of images of Max Baird Jr., who was an actor once in the Beverly Hillbillies, but then he later became a Valley porn producer, and he wore a lot of fanny packs and track pants and stuff like that. So we did incorporate a little bit of that into his character. With Seth, that was probably the easiest fitting I've ever had, because we really didn't have any personal photos of Rand to use, but we also wanted it just to feel like this guy is just middle class, doesn't really think about what he's wearing, but also brought in a lot of the kind of the 90s style that was happening at that time, and that, the normcore, as they would call it, or the Jerry Seinfeld with the white puffy sneakers and the light wash jeans, or the jean shorts, which Seth had a lot of fun with. But yeah, we also wanted to kind of touch on his background a little bit, because he grew up in Hollywood. His dad was a Hollywood star, very handsome man, always put together. And so we had this idea that Rand would always tuck in his shirt, because he was probably, as a boy, always told to tuck in his shirt by his leading, his Hollywood dad. But yeah, both of them, and when they came in, they were just so open to trying things, and it I feel like it really reads well with those two together. That shows they're from the same world.
And you mentioned the prosthetic work. Was that unique to have to dress actors around like a set of prosthetics that were designed to make these actors look like their characters?
Yeah, that was the hugest challenge, I think, on the show. I was lucky enough to be working with Barry, who was our hair, our hair department head, and David, who was makeup, and then Jason, who was prosthetics. The four of us worked very closely together, because it was something that we had to engineer anytime we had a scene coming up, especially with Lily. Being the hair, one thing is if her hair was down, did she need to be in the prosthetic chest plate, or could we cheat it with her own body and rig it in a certain way? If her, and hide it behind the wig, or if her hair was up, then that was a day that we knew that we had to put her in the chest plate. We were always trying to figure out scheduling and time where we can engineer things so that Lily didn't have to sit in the chair as long as she did every day, because it was a very long process for her before crew call, and then we had long shooting days. But a lot of the time she was actually in the prosthetic. So we had to really figure out what part of the prosthetic, every time she was coming in to do a scene, what was going to be shown. And that was pretty challenging. A lot of times we had to recreate or think about if they needed to make a new type of chest plate, if there was something that we were going to show the side boob, which was a big thing that Pamela Anderson did, and if the garment that she was wearing in that scene, did we have to recreate something for the side? And then we do have 2 episodes where she's pregnant, so we also had a pregnancy belly on top of the chest plate to consider. A lot of the clothing that she wears in those episodes, like the latex dress, we had custom made from the company that made our latex dresses to be cut and molded over her prosthetic belly. That was a kind of a huge thing to go through all the different sizes and shapes that we were going to do, measure them, and make sure that we were able to recreate that, because that's something, latex you can't sew. It has to be cut and glued into the exact proportion. And then sometimes we were able to use her own body and rig her with bras that we made that were, padded and engineered and created in a way to make it seem like she was still in her prosthetic. And then for Sebastian, we did have quite a few fittings with different types of prosthetics that they were using, because it wasn't just one that they were trying out. We did a lot of camera tests to see which one would look the best on camera underneath garments. And I think that the one that they ended up going with was bigger than we had measured for. And so our first day of shooting, we did have an emergency on set where we had to do an emergency cut and sew to recreate the garments for him to wear. But yeah, I think for me, this show really challenged me in the way to really think outside of the box and think outside of garments and how you can really make them work on something that isn't the normal go-to. And also, I feel like it taught me a lot about working collaboratively with other departments. I think this is the first time where I was on a constant call or text or email with hair, makeup, and prosthetics.
Well, congratulations on your work on the series, and thank you so
you.
much for talking with me about it.
Thank you, Daniel.